Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Rogers. I'm the Executive Director for the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. It's my privilege to welcome you all today to this All Candidates Forum representing the constituency of Kelowna-Lake Country. We have 4 candidates running for public office that will be debating the issues that are important to you and important to the future of this province. It's important for me to acknowledge as we begin today that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. We thank them for their continuing contribution to the richness of our culture. I'd like to start by acknowledging the support of many individuals and organizations that have helped to make this forum possible, including the team here at SW Event Technology for helping make it happen. We are coming to you live from their studio in downtown Kelowna. This is a good example of how a Kelowna-based business has shifted their business planning in light of COVID-19 to make, in fact, this opportunity possible. We want to thank them for their continuing partnership. They've been longtime partners of the Kelowna Chamber. We also want to acknowledge that we've put strict COVID-19 protocols in place to ensure everyone is in a safe environment. That includes practicing appropriate social distancing here in the studio, as well as ensuring comprehensive cleaning has occurred as we've moved candidates in and out of the studio. This is the last in a series of 3 forums that are taking place today. These forums will be posted afterwards on our YouTube channel. So if you're joining us live, either through the Chamber website or on Facebook, we want to thank you very much for joining us. Please share the fact that we're live, or even afterwards, share this with your network. And particularly if people are undecided as to what they will do in the upcoming election, share this so they can get to know the candidates that are seeking your support. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board. We wouldn't be able to do this type of forum and the previous 2 forums without their support. They're back again this year to help us, and we want to begin with a word from their chair.
Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Kim Heisman and I am the president of the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board, and we are very pleased to again be the presenting sponsor of the Kelowna Chamber All Candidates Forum in Kelowna.
And thanks very much to Kim and the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board for their continued support. We also want to thank the BC Fruit Growers Association, who we are also grateful for their sponsorship of today's event. Thank you also goes out to our co-host in putting the forum together, UDI and the Canadian Home Builders Association of the Central Okanagan. They helped contribute some of the questions that we'll put before the candidates today. We're also supported by the Lake Country Chamber of Commerce. We want to thank Kim and her team as well, and the board, not only in Lake Country, but on behalf of Jeffrey Robinson, the chair of the board for the Kelowna Chamber, welcome and thank you to all 4 candidates for joining us, and want to acknowledge the support from the Uptown Rutland Business Association as well that falls within the riding. Just very quickly to review the rules, they have been provided to all 4 candidates in advance. There will be 3 sections of questions that we will work through. You have a set time The person that answers the question first will have a little bit extra time, and then everyone that follows will have 30 seconds. That will work through 3 series of questions. We will give you an opportunity to introduce yourself as we move through, so you'll have opening remarks, and we will also provide a minute at the end for closing remarks. And we hope to get through this, we expect within the next 90 minutes or so. So we thank again for your participation and a bit of an overview of the rules. We also want to acknowledge the President's Circle members with the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. They've helped to make these events possible by reinvesting in the Kelowna Chamber. That includes our newest President's Circle member, Rogers Communication. We're also pleased to have MNP, Interior Savings, UBC Okanagan as members of our President's Circle. They invest in the Kelowna Chamber, and also acknowledging the continued support of our President's Circle member, BDO. Without their funding, we wouldn't be able to do public service programs such as what we're doing today. So with that out of the way, to introduce the candidates more formally, thanks to all 4 of you. I do want to acknowledge we unfortunately do not have the NDP representative. We were informed last night that he would not be able to join us. We looked at pursuing every opportunity to provide changes in this so that people could hear his voice, but we've been informed that he will not be participating. With that said, Siverado Socrates has won the draw, so to speak. We did a draw beforehand to determine speaking order. We will begin with introductions to those that have gathered, and I think we have minutes set aside for your opening introductions and comments. So, Siverado, over to you.
Mr. Rogers, fellow candidates, and people in the audience, thank you for the opportunity to speak. How would you feel if you had the cure for cancer and heart disease, yet nobody seemed to care? That's how I felt like for most of my life. We're our worst enemies. Stress is the main cause of both these. Bad diet and habits don't help. I believe that we need to spend much more time, money, and energy in developing more caring communities. This is where a top-down leadership style can be very effective. I would love to be given a chance to show you and help us make the Okanagan a model for the world to see. World pace to world peace is one of my taglines. www.okanagangold.net is my website. Please check it out. I don't mean to impress you so much as to impress upon you that I am as serious as a heart attack. Preventing one, that is. www.okanagangold.net. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Mr. Letnick, the former MLA, for opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Dan, and especially to the Silk Okanagan people for allowing us to have this on their territory. Much appreciated. Also, thank the Chamber, all our sponsors, my fellow candidates, and in particular SW Audiovisual. I know they've been going through a rough time with the pandemic, so appreciate them hosting this as well. We are living in unprecedented times for sure. We have 2 public health emergencies, and it's been a privilege to work with Adrian Dix and Dr. Bonnie Henry and the leader of the BC Green Party, Sonia Furstenau, on this joint group effort to fight the pandemic. My heart really goes out to our seniors in long-term care and all their families, the stress they've been under, business owners and employees who have lost their jobs or worried about their businesses, all our frontline workers, and everyone else that's impacted by these emergencies. I'd like to thank all our public people for following Dr. Henry's guidelines. Because of that, we are doing relatively well compared to other jurisdictions, and I look forward to having a robust debate here on some of the policy questions during the next hour, hour and a half. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Letnick. And now over to our Green candidate, John Janmaat.
Thank you. And as my colleagues here have said, thanks to the Okanagan Silk people for hosting us on this land. I'm an associate professor of economics at UBC Okanagan, specializing in environment and resource economics. And I hold a chair in water resources and environmental sustainability. And I grew up on a dairy farm in Chilliwack. I would like to see a government that reflects all the values held in BC. And I want a government that works for the long term, particularly for sustainability and environmental health. I want to compliment Norm, because he, as he talked about right now, did work very well with our Green leader, with Adrian Dix, on health policy. And I think Norm is in some ways a poster child for how a minority can work and how proportional representation could work if we ever got there. I'm running for the Greens to give people a voice to be able to to express their values and show our leaders what those are.
Great, thank you. And our last candidate has joined us today from the Libertarian Party, Kyle Geronazzo. Kyle, opening remarks.
I would like to acknowledge that we are taking place with this event on the land of the Silex Okanagan people. I would like to thank the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce for putting us on this event and Dan for emceeing the event. Since the BC Libertarian Party's founding in 1986, we have been on the forefront of such important issues as legalization of gay marriage, cannabis legalization, and most relevant to this election, the ending of ICBC. And for us now in 2020, we are the only provincial party that pledges to end the current lockdown, full stop. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for your opening comments. We will return to Siverado for the first question. This is in section number 1. This deals with BC and Kelowna Chamber policy. The first question is, the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce some months ago wrote to the Premier and Health Minister suggesting that there be a consideration of a regional approach to guidelines and regulations around COVID-19, as well as with respect to health orders that are tied to the rate of transmission within that specific health region. This is a regional-based approach that has been taken by other provinces, including Ontario, Quebec, where they are making decisions based on regional needs and concerns. As an example, recognizing that Metro Toronto, as a large populous area, is not the same with its high density as a low density area elsewhere in Northern Ontario. As we likely face a second wave, and in fact it appears, as Dr. Bonnie Henry has reinforced just recently, we are in the second wave. Do you believe a regional approach to regulations tied to the rate of transmission is reasonable? And if not, why?
I do believe that a regional approach would be the way to go. As a leader, you follow as well as lead, and you need to know your constituents, what they want to do, your local area. So it goes to reason that it should be done by region.
Thank you. Mr. Letnick, 30 seconds.
We've worked very closely with Dr. Henry over the last 8 or 9 months. I can tell you that in our many discussions with Dr. Henry and Adrian Dix, we discussed the regional approach, whether or not it was appropriate to apply what's going on in Vancouver for the Lower Mainline and all of BC. And at the same time, when it hit us in Kelowna at the July long weekend, whether or not it was fair to apply what happened here to all of BC. So, on a case-by-case basis, it might be okay to look at the regional approach. But overall, the virus is everywhere, and we have to be cognizant of that. And I think a big part of Dr. Henry's support by the population is the fact that we are following her guidelines.
John?
I think we certainly need to consider the evidence, as experts like Dr. Bonnie Henry are doing. And I think the question of whether or not we can take a regional approach depends on what that implies for the movement of the virus between regions. If we can't be sure that a regional approach is actually going to limit the spread of the virus, then it's probably not a good idea. So I think we got to look to the evidence for sure, and I'm putting my confidence in the experts that are giving us advice.
Mr. Geronazzo.
Thank you. While a regional approach would certainly be preferable over an entirely top-down provincial approach, overall, I would like to see the end of the lockdown full stop. It is the libertarian belief that the proper role of government during any kind of a pandemic should be the dissemination of as correct information as they can present to the people, so that the free people can choose how to live their lives and how to approach safety willingly and of their own volition.
Excellent. Thank you. So with that as the first question, we will come back to other health-related issues, specifically around short and long-term response as a result of COVID-19. But we are going to shift gears to another topic area, and that's with respect to natural resources and the environment. Mr. Letnick will be the first one to respond. You'll be provided 60 seconds, a minute to respond to this question. Others will follow. We'll move from my left to right. on this occasion, so we'll move that way. On this occasion, on this question rather, the commercial property industrial lands is to deal with that are at a premium in the Kelowna-Lake country area. What can you do, or what is your perspective to ensure industrial land is protected while ensuring that the ALR is also protected and residential areas and one of the fastest growing communities is also addressed? It's finding that right balance, and particularly around from a commercial property perspective in the area. Mr. Letnick?
Well, Dan, thank you for the question, and you're right. It is about finding that balance. Every few years, local municipalities are required to review their official community plans. I remember being part of that when I sat on the Kelowna City Council many, many years ago. And working with the stakeholders in that community is extremely important. Part of the process of working out a community plan and looking for industrial sites, industrial area sites, and agricultural land is getting input from the Agricultural Land Commission. So I think the best way forward is to continue what the City of Kelowna is doing now and what the District of Lake Country has done before and will do again, which is to bring all the stakeholders to the conversation and then make sure that the public has an opportunity to provide their input on more than one occasion through that process. So at the end of the day, you won't get a perfect plan. You can never get a perfect plan, but what you do is you get the best possible balanced choice.
Great, thank you. And if I misled you on the direction, I apologize, because I will continue the same way we've been moving. So it's from my right to left, and Mr. Janmaat.
Yeah, I too would agree that we need to have a process that engages with all the stakeholders. Agricultural land is very scarce in British Columbia, which is why we have an agricultural land reserve, and so certainly providing protection for that is important. And I participated, I'm chair of the Agricultural Advisory Committee for the City of Kelowna, and participated in the development of the Ag Plan for Kelowna, which really demonstrates that agriculture is important, but at the same time, yes, industry is also an important part, and residential land matters, and we do need to find a balance so that all those stakeholders are part of the decisions.
Thanks. Mr. Geronazzo.
Thank you. In regards to the ALR, I don't believe we genuinely need that in place. Currently, 94% of British Columbian land is provincial crown land. So what I believe we should do is free more land to the public, so for private ownership, and let that go as it will. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will certainly acknowledge that some of the questions that we'll be raising today are not necessarily the direct responsibility of province, which is the office you're seeking, but because there is an expectation of cooperation with all three levels of government, that you could make a comment in the context of where your role would be. So finally, 30 seconds.
This isn't going to be entirely on topic, but I'm opposite of Kyle. I do believe the agricultural land is very important, and it's the roots of the community here. I have topics on that on the website. But also, it's important to be honest and transparent. I know of some situations where a person I believe is honest has said that he's put in letters regarding different proposals, and then later things are passed saying that there were no letters of opposition. That distresses me. I was hoping he'd go on record and it could be looked into more, but meanwhile, transparency and honesty is a good process, but we have to be honest about it.
Thank you. So we'll move to the third question, and John, you'll begin by answering this one. We'll give you a minute to answer this question, and it's to do with transportation. Particularly with respect to transportation issues involving the highway and potential highway improvements through the Lake Country Corridor. What will you do, if elected, to address and potentially take immediate action to improve the efficient flow of traffic along that corridor, while also addressing the business needs of those small businesses that are close to the highway and require access to that traffic?
This is one of those situations where I wish my colleague who's running in Kelowna West were here to answer the question, because he's a transportation engineer and expert, and I do believe in relying on experts to help answer these kind of questions. But certainly transportation is a really important issue. It's an important issue in moving goods around. It's an important issue in bringing customers to businesses. And keeping the flow of traffic moving is important. At the same time, we also have to think about the sustainability of transportation. So looking at ways that public transit can be enhanced throughout the corridor. We have the Vernon to UBC bus that is taking passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles off of the road, and similarly, if we're able to enhance transit in other places, it actually helps reduce the load. And likewise, active transportation also provides a way to take some of the pressure off. Not everybody's going to use these modes. Most of us are probably going to continue driving, but it helps in order to look at a balanced transportation system that uses all modes rather than just focusing on one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Geronazzo, on the issue of transportation in the riding.
For sure. I would agree with some of what you've said there, for sure, in terms of consulting with professionals, consulting with experts. I do think transportation, being that it covers the entire province, is a complex issue and should have more voices in the room when discussing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I too would concur with the Green Party candidate on the importance of consulting with experts. And I would also like to suggest we need to really work on being motivating for people to use transit more and drive less and consume less. There's a tagline the Texas government used to try to get people to clean up more because they were having a big problem with litter. And it took a lot of thought, and they came up with the idea, don't mess with Texas. Wouldn't you know, there's a lot less litter because the people owned that and we're proud of it. I think we need to work on the motivation of people to be less.
Thanks. I thought you were going to say don't mess with Lake Country. I thought
That's a good idea too.
So the final comment on the issue of potential transportation needs in the riding, Mr. Letnick.
I agree. Don't mess with Lake Country. That's for sure. That's a good place to start. We expanded Highway 33 to 4 lanes. We expanded Highway 97 to 6 lanes, improved the intersection at Sexsmith. We built a new highway going from Winfield to Oyama, improved transit, John Hindle Drive joining Glenmore through UBC Okanagan to Highway 97. Invested $7.2 million to buy the rail trail, which is a great opportunity for transportation in the future. And of course, Handy Dart. What are we going to do more? We have lots to do. We have to fix Beaver Lake Road, Glenmore Road, Highway 97 intersection. We have to move the transit yard. We have to give people choice in auto insurance. We have to help people going to Big White and making that road safer along Joe Rich. There's just an hour's worth of conversations here, but I only have 30 seconds.
You did fairly well with cutting off. John?
Well, I think one thing that the experts have said when it comes to transportation is you don't build your way out of congestion. And building more highways, we do need capacity to some degree, but if we overemphasize just building more highways, expanding bridges, et cetera, we're just going to end up with more congestion. There is a pent-up demand for travel, and that just gets released, and we end up with no real fixes.
So very quickly, seeing you're responding for clarity for those that have joined us in the Green's position, is the Green about spending less and transitioning, or is it just stopping investment in roads?
It's making sure we have balance, making sure we take account of the way transportation demand actually works, not just simply building more highways. Building highways just leads to more congestion. It doesn't solve the congestion problem, and that's been shown around the world.
But there would be investment in highways?
There would be investment as appropriate.
Great, thank you. The next question we have, and I believe, Mr. Geronazzo, you'll get the chance for the first crack at this. We'll give you 60 seconds, and we'll give 30 seconds in response. And this is on the trade front, in particular, interprovincial trade. Alberta, as an example, imports more than 17 million bottles of wine from BC each year, and that's probably a stat that's a couple years old. That amounts to about $70 million per year paid to BC wineries, many of which are within the riding that you're running to represent. Though, despite all this important trade, there still seems to be a reluctance among some provinces to allow free flow of alcohol products. And in fact, in 2018, following steps in BC to block TMX by the current government, Alberta threatened an all-out boycott of BC wines. In that context, do you believe interprovincial trade should be a priority? And if elected, what would you do to ensure interprovincial trade and growth in products such as BC wines?
Thank you. Yes. One founding principle that Canada was built upon was free trade between all provinces. That was one of our within our founding documents of Canada as a country. We need to uphold that. If a province is trying to prevent trade from one to another, then that does need to be met with perhaps similar measures. Overall, though, I would prefer that I'd like to see completely free trade between all provinces, as we were founded upon.
Thank you. Ms. Siverado?
Again, this isn't exactly answering the question, but it's interesting that you say that, because when it came up, I was talking to some people, and when the Dixie Chicks were banned from radios, I bought one of their CDs, and I talked to a couple people, and they did the same thing. So sometimes those things work backwards. If it's a good product, people will buy it, and we have good wine.
Thank you. Mr. Letnick?
I had the privilege of serving as Minister of Agriculture for 4 years, and a big part of the ministry is the interprovincial trade of our goods and services in farms. Wine, of course, being one of the top of the list that we have here in the sunny Okanagan. We have to recognize that Alberta, our neighbors, our brothers and sisters there, have real serious issues with energy. And when we try to block Trans Mountain Pipeline, amongst other things, that gets their back up, and for a good reason. So I think what we have to do is continue to collaborate with them, make sure they have a prosperous future. That way we can make sure that they get our wines. And Ontario is the big nut to crack. They don't like our wines, not because the wines aren't better, it's just because they like the taxes more. So we have to work constantly with Ontario and Quebec to make sure that our wines are exported to those big markets.
Thank you. Mr. Janmaat?
Trade is important, and as an economist, I'm certainly someone who is trained to look at free trade as much as possible. But we do have to take account of the impacts of the things we trade on things like the environment. And so for things like TMX, for example, if we're not have the right policies in place to make sure that if something goes wrong, it's going to be paid for, that the environmental effects are dealt with, then it's not good trade. We need to have effective means, such as for TMX, something like a large bond to deal with any issues. And Alberta's got to stand up to the plate too and make their contribution rather than just trying to use a constitution to beat us over the head.
Thank you. So we'll move into our second set of questions, and these are questions that have been submitted by our partner stakeholders and those that have assisted us in collaborating to put today's forum and discussion together. We will begin with a question from the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board. Realtors strongly support governments making housing affordability a key priority. If you were to be elected, yourself or your party, what would be, as an example, 3 strategies that you believe could be undertaken to address the issue of affordable housing? Ms. Siverado, we'll start with you.
Well, this is a topic that I feel pretty motivated by. First of all, homelessness is better prevented than cured. And in terms of housing, I stayed at a homeless shelter for a while. I got to know some people and I've been keeping tabs on how they're doing, and I was happy to see one on a bus today, and he's got a great place and he's got a good job now. I'm really happy for him. Another fella, he got low-income housing, and he's able to save up and hopefully get his own place later. He's pretty happy. He showed me his place just last week. I hear there's a number of houses in Kelowna that are sitting vacant that are owned by the city. I feel that's disgusting. And I think there should be a program to help vet people and get these houses being used. Apparently they're afraid they'll become crack houses, but not everybody that's homeless has drug issues.
Thank you.
I didn't answer all 3 exactly, but.
Okay. Thank you. Response on this issue of affordable housing, Mr. Letnick.
Well, thank you, Dan. And, affordable housing comes in many shapes and sizes for many different income groups. One of the first things we said we would do after the NDP introduced it was get rid of the spec tax. Spec tax is not a spec tax. It's an asset tax and discourages people from investing in housing. What we would do is actually bring in a condo flipping tax instead. Also, another piece would be to incentivize municipalities for affordable housing. See how many they build and give them incentives at a provincial level for building even more or encouraging others. And the last piece is the strata. Strata insurance has gone through the roof. We have to work with strata owners to make sure that there is a better way to afford strata insurance. That would reduce the cost of affordable housing as well.
Just for a point of clarity on that, you make reference to the speculation and vacancy tax, which actually does not apply in Lake Country. So one could suggest that because it's in the neighboring jurisdiction, it actually helps Lake Country. Do you have an opinion on that, or how would you counter that?
The speculation tax applies to Kelowna and West Kelowna. So what you end up having is if people want to build houses here and move here and leave them vacant before they actually get here, they would think of moving maybe their property to Lake Country or Peachland or somewhere else. That's usually what happens when you see an area closed to development, an area closed to the demand. They go somewhere else. So I think it's much better to have it on balance. If you're going to have a condo flipping tax, if that's really what you want, which is what we're proposing, to have it apply broadly and not focus just on specific areas of the province.
Excellent, thanks. Is there Janmaat on the housing?
The Greens platform includes a rental credit like the homeowners credit in order to help with affordability. It's also going to be promoting co-op housing and a nonprofit housing, as well as looking at land purchases for the purpose of making land available for housing. There's certainly an issue with investment, housing as investment and housing as roofs over the head. And how we distinguish between that is, I think, one of the issues. People, certainly this was when Christy Clark was in place and there was lots of conversations about what do we do about the housing crisis. Well, one of the things was, well, we can't slow the market down too much because people have invested in their houses and they expect the values to go up. And so how can we make sure that people have roofs over their head and properly balance that investment side?
We'll wrap up in time. Thank you. Mr. Geronazzo, 30 seconds on affordable housing.
Thank you, Dan. The pricing for houses comes down to supply and demand. As I mentioned previously, 94% of British Columbia is owned by the province, whereas only 5% is owned by private Canadians within BC. Furthermore, we work with municipality to reduce the amount of red tape that goes in between constructing a house and actually having an owner for the house. Third of all, as I mentioned previously, we would end the ALR. It is the Libertarian position that the province should have no right to tell you that you can only use your land for agricultural purposes.
And thank you. Now I'm confused. Did we get everybody in on that one? We did start with affordable, and we're now at Mr. Letnick for the next question. Thanks for keeping me on track. Trying to do this on the fly. We expected 5 participating, so I have to juggle a little bit to adjust for the 4. The next question, if you could, what would you do about street crime that many urban centers are dealing with, much of which is connected to petty drug trafficking trade and issues with respect to homelessness and those that are preying on the homeless and those that have mental health and addiction challenges. Mr. Letnick, if you could.
Well, the first thing I believe we should do is treat the causes and prevent the harm in the first place. So we have to get to the root as to why people are suffering mental health and addiction issues. Poverty is one of them. So our single parent initiative program would help people get out of poverty. We need to support children in foster care up to the age of 25 so they have an easier transition and less problems. We have to continue expanding our advocacy center that we just got here in Kelowna to others jurisdictions. The Foundry is a great example of how we can help people, young people. We have to increase mental health and supports in our public schools. And we have to have a path to recovery. We can't just be putting people into houses, which is important, of course, with the right wraparound services. But when people reach out and say they want to get off of drugs, we have to not only provide them with a place to detox, We have to then provide them the total supports so they don't end up relapsing back into the same community that they were in the first place. And on top of that, we have to increase policing and prosecution services so that people can feel safe in their neighborhoods, knowing that an unarmed police officer is walking the beat and protecting them.
Thank you. Mr. Janmaat?
Well, I start by complimenting the City of Kelowna for taking a housing first approach. The evidence on best way to deal with housing is housing first. You put a roof over people's heads, and then they're in a position to deal with the other challenges they have in their lives. Now, certainly, we need the other supports that wrap around that, but those other supports without a roof over your head aren't really all that useful. And again, I'll compliment the City of Kelowna and the standing with the housing first policy during election when there was a lot of criticism of it. So housing first.
Mr. Geronazzo?
For sure. Well, I do agree with Mr. Letnick that we should be treating the cause and not the effects. The difference between the liberal approach and a libertarian approach is that a libertarian approach focuses upon voluntary action. So last election, in the 2018 by-election I ran a part of, I challenged all of my fellow candidates to donate 10% of what their campaign budget was to a local nonprofit, and I will continue to do that again for this election.
Thank you. And last, a comment on this issue. Siverado, Socrates, our independent candidate.
I think it's important to recognize it's a case-by-case situation. No one size fits all. So it's important to have community involved with this. And our social workers and police are pretty overwhelmed with it all. So on that idea, again, having more community, we can be a model for, I think you would see things change up a lot if we really cared.
Thank you. And response, you answered the question first,
Yeah,
Mr. Letnick.
Just to clarify, Dan, if I could, based on what I heard a couple of my colleagues say, is we need to treat the causes and the effects, not the causes or the effects is one thing. And also, I believe that if you're going to do a housing first model, you have to make sure that the housing is distributed throughout the communities in British Columbia and in the Okanagan, not focus in one particular place, as was the case about a year or so ago. And that's why the Rutland neighborhood were up in arms with it. I also believe that you don't introduce a new facility unless you address the problems you have with the existing facilities, which wasn't done. Now, BC Housing, to their credit, have apologized for that, but now it's time to see action to the words.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to our next question. And it has to do with, sorry, make sure I'm on track here, with respect to, I think we're, John, at you, and it's to do with agricultural land reserve and preservation of farmland while promoting agriculture. What would your party do to make agriculture more profitable, to ensure that, as an example, there aren't pressures for other land uses such as residential when you have the ALR, if farming is more profitable? What will you, if elected, or your party do to assist that sector?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the challenges, is if agriculture is not profitable, then people are going to be looking for things to do outside of agriculture or to do with their land. But we also have very little agricultural land, so finding ways to enhance its protect it is important. And protecting agricultural land not only provides food security, as people like to talk about, but it's an important part of our community as a whole and the green spaces that agriculture provides. So to answer the question, there's a lot of emphasis in the Green Platform on enabling people to enter agriculture. That's one of the challenges too. There's talk about land banks. There's efforts to provide opportunities for small and even micro farmers. And one of the things personally, I've had the opportunity to do research that it looks at working with farmers to understand adaptation to climate change. And one of the things that farmers would really like to see is an expanded extension service to provide knowledge and expertise. We used to have that in this province, but it has been done away with, and farmers want it back.
Great, thank you. On supporting agriculture?
In terms of supporting agriculture, I think a lot of British Columbians have been priced out of the labor market. I think a lot of regulations that were put in place in BC with good intentions in mind have done harm to those who are just becoming part of the job market, the younger folks just getting in their first job. In terms of agriculture, I would see a very beneficial first job for many younger British Columbians.
Ms. Siverado?
Thank you. This is a topic very close to my heart. You'll see there's a webpage, part of my webpage dedicated to an area near where I live that's being talked about being taken out of the ALR. The typical politicians only know how to make money through taxes. I think there's so many ways to be creative with the land, and if we give people a chance, there's just 6 seconds is not enough time. That's all I can say.
Thank you. And I certainly appreciate that 30 seconds is a pretty tight time frame to provide an answer, but we also respect your time, so we'll try to keep things within the hour-and-a-half time frame. We also encourage people that are viewing or others that may watch this when it's recording to check out your website, so we'll make that available. We have information on the Kelowna Chamber website for each candidate and their background and bio. It's important, particularly during these challenging times where it's not possible for constituents or potentially those that are voting to make contact with their candidates. I'm sure not many of you are knocking on doors, so we are in unique circumstances. We apologize for the tight timelines on this, but there are plenty of opportunities to gain a further background. So on the issue of agriculture, again, 30 seconds, Mr. Letnick, in providing greater support if you're elected.
Thank you, Dan. First, I would recommend to everyone that's watching to do more of what they're doing, which is to buy local. Buy local from our farmers, and that way they can get the most profit. Also, we need to improve access to farm workers. If you don't have the workers, you can't harvest, so we'll work with that. Access to water at an affordable price. We see that the city of Kelowna has taken over some of the water districts. We want to make sure the farmers have access to the water at an affordable price. And should I be re-elected, I will work with the BC Food Growers Association to see higher coverage for agri-stability, a Columbia River Trust Impacts Trust, and more money for their replant program, which they hold so dear.
Excellent. Thanks very much. That moves us to the fourth question in this section, which are questions submitted by our partners and stakeholders, and this is with respect to tourism. Mr. Geronazzo, we'll begin with you on this question. What relief measures or action would you undertake to ensure rural and urban tourism and hospitality businesses remain solvent during the pandemic? And do you have any long-term plans to provide tourism support to get it back to where it once was as a major driver of economic activity for the region?
For sure, thank you. Rather than giving away more taxpayer money to businesses that was collected from those very businesses themselves, my approach would rather be to cut the taxes to those businesses so that they may better use their money than what the province might be able to deem worthy for themselves. We believe that a voluntary solution in terms of how one runs one's business and how one runs one's life would be better than some sort of a top-down approach where tax dollars are given out willy-nilly by politicians.
Thank you. Socrates?
Again, this is a topic close to my heart, and I'm essentially the president of the International Institute for Peace Through Tourism that was founded in Canada in the 80s. Yet we tend not to appreciate peace unless it's taken away, so nothing much was done with it until I went to Africa. That was a requirement to go to the World Conference there. I think now more than ever we can appreciate the value of peace and local as we're sticking together more.
Thank you. Mr. Letnick?
There's no doubt that tourism and hospitality has been hit hard during the pandemic. First thing we would do is cut the PST down to zero in the first year and then 3% after that until the economy recovers. We'd also reduce the small business tax to zero. We'd offer loan guarantees for tourism and hospitality business sector to help them get over this hump over the winter. We would grow our regional tourism hubs, just like the one in downtown Kelowna. We need to help our municipal governments with the airports, especially the City of Kelowna Airport. Without that airport, our tourism sector will suffer quite a bit. And we need to see some of the money come from WorkSafe BC surpluses to help our tourism sector with the PPE.
Thank you. Mr. Janmaat on supporting tourism.
COVID has certainly been a shock to tourism, and with people not traveling, people being fearful about going to restaurants and such, it's been tough. And the winter is going to be definitely a scary time with our patios closed. And the Green Party has allocated $300 million now, like as soon as we can. And in fact, if this election hadn't been called, we could have actually been addressing that. But instead, it's kind of been put behind for a while, and we're going to be having to pick it up later. But yes, tourism is critical, and we need to provide support to the tourism sector to get them through the next 6 months.
Excellent. Thank you. And I should note that I have a habit of saying excellent. I usually say excellent because you're paying attention to time. I'm not making a comment on your response. So excellent, you did it on the time.
It was an excellent answer anyway.
So I'll let others judge the content of the responses. So thanks very much for that. That takes us through the second question. We're going to move to the last set of questions. These are questions that have been submitted by Chamber members, members of the business community, and citizens that have forwarded their comments to us. The first one is around taxation. And again, for the start of this, we will begin with Ms. Socrates for the first answer. And I'm going to change this up, and I appreciate that talking deep about issues in 30 seconds is extremely challenging. And we do have some time to make some adjustments along the way. So I will provide 60 seconds for each person to respond to this issue. And the question is, the next provincial government must commit to real solutions that enables BC's tax system and economy to support and recover from the pandemic, while also generating the needs of revenue for government programs. What is your approach, if elected, to ensuring that there is reasonable tax reform, an issue identified as the #1 issue by the BC Chamber of Commerce going forward?
Again, I believe typical politicians only know how to make money through taxes. As a small business owner, I've learned to be quite creative, and any business knows if you save money, you make money. There's so much to be said on this with the aspect of peace through tourism, because when you have more peace, you have less disease, you have less violence, you have less hospital problems, police, so many things. But I missed my main point there.
So I can help, certainly, and at any time, if you want me to
If you could
repeat
go back
a
to me
question,
for
I don't
30
mind doing
seconds.
that. We are covering a lot of ground in a very short period. It's about tax reform. Do you think it's important to address tax reform? And if elected, would you?
Yes, and I'm really glad to see the Green Party has been instrumental in eliminating big business from being able to just inundate politicians with their money and be bought. Because I think if we had more of an approach where when it's a bit of a sliding scale, I think if people would be willing to donate, I shouldn't say donate, they would be happy to spend taxes if they knew it was going to things that were going to be good for the province and people, not just their business.
Thank you. And again, we'll give you each a minute. I understand this is a complex issue. There are a lot of facets with respect to tax reform that may arise. So 60 seconds, Mr. Letnick.
Thank you, Dan. You know, it's really important that we stay competitive. If we're not competitive, we won't be creating the jobs. We won't be attracting investments. And obviously, taxes is a big part of that competitiveness framework that people look at as to whether or not they're going to invest in British Columbia. So immediately, in the first 60 days, if we form government, we are committed to removing the PST across the board, and in the following years, bring it down to 3% until the economy has a chance to recover. I think this is a prudent approach, especially given what happened in 2008 and 2009 when we experienced a recession due to the subprime mortgage crisis. We went through a few years of recession, didn't cut any of the programs in healthcare and education, and then came back out even stronger after the economy came back. We would also form an independent tax commission And this independent, nonpartisan tax commission would go around and find the best way to provide the revenues that government needs to offer those important services that it does, by also being very competitive in the Canadian landscape.
Thank you. Mr. Janmaat, tax reform, tax issues with respect to the Green Party, and in light of the fact that we're in a pandemic.
So taxes serve a couple of purposes in the economy. One is certainly, as you mentioned, raising revenue for providing essential government services. Another one is providing incentives to direct the economy towards goals that we like. A great example that the Liberals actually introduced is a carbon tax. And other incentives we may also want to build into the tax system to encourage those kind of behaviors. And a third role is redistribution, is ensuring that those in need, so part of those expenditures is a redistribution. So we need a fair tax system, and we do need to be revisiting the tax system over and over again to make sure it's actually accomplishing those goals. I don't agree with the cut to the PST. I think if we're talking about economic stimulation in a pandemic, we want to give money to the people who are going to spend it. The thing about an across-the-board sales tax cut is, as the Liberals did mention in their campaign information, it reduces a regressive tax, but at the same time, you can make it even more powerful as an economic stimulus by not removing the PST and giving more money to those who will spend it in the lower income class.
Thank you. Mr. Geronazzo.
The Libertarian approach is that the most reasonable tax reform is the one that brings taxes closest to zero. Tax dollars spent do not create value. They are merely dollars taken from something that has produced value and redistributed to where the government sees fit. In terms of our policy, we would increase the tax levels so that anyone below $44,000 for annual income would not be provincially taxed on their income. We would see a permanent elimination of PST rather than a temporary one. And we would also seek to reduce and eliminate small business taxes and corporate taxes. Thank you.
So I'm going to follow that, and if I could get a response to 15 seconds or so, if you could make a comment in light of spending, and I will preface it by making a comment that for a long time, the Canadian Chamber Network, the BC Chamber Network, and both Chambers of Commerce have suggested that senior levels of government should follow what local governments do and balance their budget on an ongoing basis. Now, I appreciate, and Mr. Letnick would know that that's a requirement under law. So, but where do we stand and your party stand with respect to the level of service being provided and the amount of deficit or debt we will face in the longer term? Is there any sense of where that will be, or is that a discussion that potentially would be after we get through COVID-19? I'm going to start this order and we'll move across. If you could, a quick comment, 30 seconds or so.
Sure. In terms of paring down government so that it is more effective, there's a number of countries out in Asia where they actually reward departments rather than penalize them for coming under budget rather than over budget. And we would like to seek to emulate that model.
So the Green Party's position, John, if you could, with respect to the amount of deficit or debt that will be left for future generations.
We do need to make sure that we don't overburden the future, but at the same time, balanced budget legislation tends to make economic cycles worse. Because when the economy shrinks, government revenue shrinks, government spending shrinks, that just makes it even worse. So having the ability to soften the blow when the economy takes a downturn is an important role for government.
Mr. Letnick, where we are today and where we might go.
Well, the PST reduction to zero and to 3% the following years would actually give a household about $1,700 in their pocket to invest in the economy. That should get the economy going again, help with the multiplier effect. Our leader has clearly said that now is not the time to balance the budget. It would take 4 to 5 years to get back to balance given the severity of the recession. And that is without cutting any programs, healthcare or education programs.
Okay. Ms. Socrates, if you could, if you have a perspective, being an independent.
I think it would take a case-by-case seeing where that money was spent. I did hear an interesting thing the other day by someone whose husband worked with ICBC and how they hired an American to decide what to do. And, well, I think BC should have been hired, and the answer he gave cost us a lot of money.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for that quick. Did you want a quick response very quickly, Kyle?
For sure. It's a question for Mr. Letnick.
No, that's not going to happen. I provide the questions, but
Sure.
was there a specific response that you had?
Oh, I just question if we accept the premise that the BC government will not collapse in upon itself for getting rid of PST for 1 year. Why does it need to come back for any year?
So it's a legitimate question with respect to reduction of PST, just providing clarity in the short or long term and the impact of that. And you addressed some of that, I think, previously, but Norm?
If I understand the question correctly, the reduction in PST would be 1 year to 0. And the second year would be 3%, and will continue that way until the economy had a chance to recover.
Like, as part of what I think I'm hearing, and a reasonable question, if it succeeds in stimulating economic activity, would you, if elected, and if the Liberals government, consider future changes?
Part of the platform, and it's something I really believe in, is to getting this independent tax commission of experts to come in and look at all our taxes and see which ones work well for British Columbians, and in particular British Columbian businesses also, because they drive economic growth and hire a lot of people. We like those jobs. So make sure we get that independent tax commission to look at all our taxes and then make recommendations to government on which taxes we should keep and which taxes we should get rid of or change.
Well, thank you very much. And it assists in making this a little bit more lively, so I think that's a good thing. We're not requiring high ratings on this, but it's good to have some back and forth. I think our goal is to have productive conversations that provide information for those that are tuning in. So thanks for that exchange.
Thank you.
We will move on to the next question in here, and this is with respect to a fairly straightforward question. We'll begin with Mr. Letnick. On this occasion, it's fairly straightforward. We'll have the opening response for 60 seconds, and then we'll have a 30-second follow-up for the rest, and we'll move down the line. What do you believe, Mr. Letnick, is the most important issue for the riding? What specifically will you do, or your party, if elected, do to address the most important issue in your mind for the residents of Kelowna-Lake Country?
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you to whoever asked that question. This is my 4th election for provincial government, and with each election, what I do is I produce a flyer that goes to everyone's home. Hopefully people have received it. If not, they should get it pretty soon. On the back of the flyer, it has what we've done together, our accomplishments, and then probably just as important, not more important, is what we still have left to do, those things we want to do together. So the list is actually much longer on the things to do, because as I knock on doors, I keep hearing great ideas that we need to advocate for. So I would say, and to summarize it all, there isn't one most important thing. I have a lot of very important things that the people of Kelowna-Lake Country, the voters, have asked me to work on should I be elected. Things like a brand new Rutland Middle School, things like fixing the intersection of Highway 97 and Glenmore Road, things like providing more daycare, more affordable housing, making sure that people with mental health and addictions are taken care of. And what I do is, if I'm re-elected, I'll put this in my office in Victoria and in my office in Kelowna, and I'll look at it every day to try to get more tech box besides the ones that say, here are the things we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Letnick. Mr. Janmaat, 30 seconds on addressing what you believe is the most important issue for your potential constituents.
I like Norm's answer, that there isn't one single issue. There's a lot of issues, and the issues come from the community. And we need to have that dialogue and that communication with the community. And I'm pretty sure Norm would agree that that dialogue doesn't just occur at election time. It occurs on an ongoing basis. We've got to have that communication. We've got to be in touch with the people in our riding so that we find out what the issues are, and then we can bring those to Victoria and be part of the conversation. And we need to do that for everybody in the riding, not just the people who happen to vote for us.
Thank you. Mr. Geronazzo.
I'm afraid I have to disagree with both of these folks entirely. I do think there is one singular issue that is facing us right now that is the most important, and that is the COVID-19 lockdown. We are artificially restricting businesses from being able to remain profitable and keep people working. We would, again, as I said before, end the COVID-19 lockdown in terms of political rule and just still keep disseminating the correct information to people, which I would say the government's done a decent job of so far.
Thank you. Mr. Geronazzo, just for clarity, as the Libertarian, if you could provide, when you make reference lockdown, could you define that in your mind, or?
Artificial restrictions on how many people can enter a business, artificial restrictions on how many people can be served in a restaurant. I know someone myself actually who would have ran for us in Kelowna Mission had he not the difficulty of supporting his family because of how this has impacted his own personal business.
So is, just for clarity, is the position of the Libertarian Party that there should be no or just different regulation?
We would end the lockdown whole stop and continue to disseminate the correct information upon the pandemic.
Okay. Thank you. Siverado.
Old McDonald's Farm, Okanagan Game Farm, Malibu, Wild and West, family campgrounds. We've lost so many things due to seasonal tourism, and we've got a lot of pot shops that are year-round. I think we could have been subsidizing and helping those stay around so we had things for the kids to do. We'd have a lot less suicides and drug addictions going on right now. The Peaceful Tourist is a very good one. They cost us less, and they, again, peace through tourism could be a great way to bring economy and save lives here.
Thank you. Mr. Letnick, you had a quick response you wanted?
Yeah, a quick response. I'd like to agree with John that what happens in between elections is extremely important. Take the rail trail, for example. We didn't know that at the prior election that we would be looking for $7.2 million to buy the rail trail. That came up, and it was an opportunity that the local Team Okanagan MLAs advocated for with the Premier, which Christy Clark, and we were able to get our 1/3 to buy that rail trail. And I think John would agree that that's going to be a legacy for our kids and our grandchildren going forward. And the last piece is something nobody really knows happens is most of the work of an MLA is done in the office by his staff, working hard to handle issues on ICBC, MSP, WorkSafe issues, access to health services.
All right, I'll ask you to wrap up.
Really thank my staff over the years that have done an exceptional job on taking care of my former constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Letnick.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to the next question. And John, we will begin with you. And this relates, building on some of the comments with respect to COVID-19 and responses. Given where we are and what the action that's been taken currently by the government in power, if you were elected during this, or if you are elected, how would your approach to responding be different than what we are currently seeing? For a minute, you got it.
Experts around the world have been pointing out that we're in a climate crisis and that this actually creates an opportunity right now to build back better. Investing in industries that are green, that are moving forward, investing in people to train them for the new jobs are the things that we can do. And we can take advantage of the fact that interest rates are really low and government borrowing is not that expensive in order to invest in this transition. And that has been called for by people at the IMF. Mark Carney, former chair of the Bank of Canada, is a major champion for reform of financial systems and encouraging the proper accounting for the climate hazards that we are facing and making sure that we move forward. And so the Green Party strongly supports the transition to a green economy and that this recovery is a time to spend the money wisely to move us in that direction.
Thank you. So both in how we're dealing with it and potential recovery. And I know, Mr. Geronazzo, we're going to go to you. Yeah, I think your last answer, but I'll give you 30 seconds if you want to add to it with respect to, if elected, your approach to COVID-19.
Sure, I think I've made my approach already very, very clear in terms of where we stand on the COVID-19 lockdown. So rather than go into that, I would just mention that I would like to introduce a private member's bill to reduce the salary of all MLAs if elected. Thank you.
So cutting costs is a strategy.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Ms. Socrates, 30 seconds on this issue.
I think overall BC is doing a very good job on things, in Kelowna as well, especially. I think in some ways COVID's a blessing in that I believe we're supporting more local community and resiliency. It gives empathy to the reality of many small businesses, for example, income loss due to injuries or inability due to fires, and perhaps even to other cultures, the prejudices.
Thank you, Mr. Letnick.
Well, I believe my participation with the Minister Dixon, Dr. Henry, and Sonia Firstno is on the public record, so I'll focus on the economic response part of your question, if I may. Our party has come up with a comprehensive pandemic response plan. I believe that it is a pretty good plan, and would encourage people to read it online if they haven't already. And it includes a $30 billion capital infrastructure investment to get the economy going, more than 10,000 new childcare spaces, incentives for business to bring in their own childcare, and something really important in my heart is changing the way we take care of our seniors in long-term care so that they are more protected, and so are the staff, and then families have an opportunity to visit them and take care of them as well.
Thank you. So our last question in this section, and we'll provide our first respondent 60 seconds and follow up by others with 30 seconds on this issue, on a question that's been provided by one of our members. And it's in part response to the pandemic, but I think in the larger issues with respect to growing our economy. Will your party support the growth of the manufacturing sector in particular? And if so, how would you support that sector in the development of manufacturing, not only in the riding, but in the region, considering such things as tax credits, grants, flexibility, and assisting, addressing the skills gap? Do you see an area where you would, if elected, provide support to manufacturing?
Absolutely. The first thing that I would like to see is a lowering of the corporate tax rate in BC. Last I looked, we were at the exact same rate as every other province across the nation, whereas just a number of years ago, we actually had a lower corporate tax rate, where more businesses had a reason to stay in BC rather than move across the country. Furthermore, I would like to see to relax regulations dealing with worker regulation overall, so that people are able to not be priced out of the workforce. I think a $15-20 minimum wage is incredibly high for the folks that would find it difficult to generate more than $15.20 for their employers.
Thank you. Ms. Siverado, on manufacturing and potential growth and support by government to foster that sector's development.
I believe, again, should be a case-by-case basis. I think back a little bit to my going to Victoria. I'd heard someone from the tourism, it's separate but similar. I was really excited by what she had to say about tourism, and I thought I'd like to visit when I was on holiday there. I ended up getting bumped, my opponent, as I was taking the bus in, and then she ended up saying horseback riding. When I think tourism in Okanagan, I think wine, golf, or skiing, and they have industries that lobby for them, and that's what people see, but there's so much more. So maybe we could have just a group of people potentially helping everybody, not just those that pay them money. I'm not sure how that would work.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for your time. Manufacturing Center, Mr. Letnick.
Well, we have to continue with looking at all our tax regulations and barriers to growth and investment in manufacturing. One of the positive things that we've seen here is a complete expansion of UBC Okanagan, something that the previous Liberal government was responsible for. We see UBC Okanagan wanting to get into aerospace manufacturing, looking at a downtown campus, and I would be, if I'm re-elected, a big advocate for them on that, as well as Okanagan College. And we have a new high-tech manufacturer in Lake Country, actually it's in Kelowna, just in the border with Lake Country, called Breathe, making masks because of COVID. We should continue to encourage this kind of innovation and entrepreneurship in our riding.
Thank you. And John, finally on this one?
I think government has a horrible record of picking winners, and it does a really good job of supporting losers. So I think when it comes to supporting any particular industry, that's not what government should be doing. It shouldn't be specific. It should be creating a playing field that encourages entrepreneurship, encourages competition in business, and then supports people so that people don't fall through the cracks. So with respect to that, I actually would agree with Norm that a good continuing investigation of the tax system, making sure it doesn't discriminate unfairly against particular sectors, and so that it's a balanced playing field that everybody can compete on fairly, and making sure that the environmental liabilities are well accounted for.
So if you could just, on a quick response note on that, in light of COVID-19, which has impacted some sectors significantly more than others. In fact, in some occasions, there has been opportunities. Providing manufacturing for medical grade masks is an example of an opportunity that we see. So from your perspective, if elected, given that we're still in the pandemic, would you see, or does the Green Party support a bit more of a surgical approach to provide assistance to those?
Certainly a surgical approach, but not a highly specific. Particularly don't support individual firms on a lobby by lobby, help me kind of basis. It's got to be particular to, if necessary, sectors. So the Green Party platform does talk about supporting tourism because it's a particularly hard-hit sector, but the question didn't seem to refer to COVID, so I was talking more about a general overall approach where I don't think government should be picking winners, or trying to. They don't usually do it very well.
And part of that might be on my end, just in presenting the question. There was in the context of COVID at the start, but that's why.
I may have missed that, sorry.
It's all right. That's why I reached out for the clarification.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. So that brings us to the end of the questions that we have prepared. And I must admit, as we work through those questions, you are the third of 3 forums. We did deliberately try not to repeat too many questions. I apologize if some of the really juicy ones got to the other candidates in the other 3 ridings, but you did excellent in responding to the questions that we posed to you in the time frame that you have been provided. That brings us to the final step in our forum today. It's the summary remarks from each of the candidates. When we began, we started with Ms. Siverado and moved across and finished with Mr. Geronazzo. We will do the reverse order for concluding remarks. We will begin, Mr. Geronazzo, with yourself. You have 60 seconds.
Well, thank you for hosting this event, and thank you for everyone who's tuned in today. Thank you for my fellow candidates who have joined us today to discuss these issues. I think I've made my positions on the different issues brought up tonight quite clear. If you would like to see a candidate who would fight for your liberties, your freedoms, a candidate who would promote lower taxes, more choice, and real freedom, I would be your candidate for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Siverado, concluding remarks.
Prevention of disease is not the only benefit of peace. Suicide, war, and many other social ills can be prevented, if not cured, through peace initiatives. I'm a runner, I'm a rider, I'm a soldier, I'm no saint. I live for what I love, I won't be what I ain't. Some say I wear my heart upon my sleeve, I say I put my heart into anything I believe. I don't put labels or limits on you, I expect just the same. Give me half a chance, you'll see what great things we can gain. I've led many trail rides, but first had to ride them on my own. Had many nervous riders and taught them to go on. Let's take the reins out of democracy and lead each other a new way with role models of gentle guidance for those who go astray. These lines are kind of random, but what am I supposed to do? I've had over 40 years and only 30 seconds to get some things to you.
Thank you. And you did that within 60.
60,
on that occasion.
I'm so used to that 30-second rule. I changed it last minute.
Sorry. Excellent. Thank you very much for that contribution. And Mr. Letnick, concluding remarks.
Thank you, Dan, and again, thank you to the Chamber for hosting and all the sponsors. Really appreciate this opportunity to be with people who have put themselves out there. It's not easy. I've been doing it for many years, and I can tell you it's still not easy to put ourselves out there for everyone to watch, so congratulations to all the candidates and to their teams for supporting them during this very terrible time with COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the addictions emergency. I just want to say to the people who are watching that service is in my DNA. I don't know how to live without serving, whether it's on a voluntary basis, as I've done in many occasions, or whether it's in elected office. Should I be re-elected, I will serve you with the best of my ability from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. Should I not be re-elected, I will continue to serve in a volunteer capacity. I just ask you to review our platform and also review the local platform so you can see what priorities you have given me should I be successful in achieving your confidence and your trust to be your voice in Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letnick. And Mr. Janmaat.
And I too am grateful for the opportunity to be here and to speak to the people of the Chamber and the people beyond who will be watching this. I wish I wasn't running in a riding against Norm Letnick. I wish I was running in a political system where I could be elected and Norm could be elected and we could work together, but that's not the system we have. Because Norm clearly has demonstrated in Victoria and through his service that, yes, dedicated to service for sure, and yes, willing to work across party lines. And I would like to see a government where that is more encouraged than it currently is. So a vote for me is a vote for that kind of a future, of a vote for sustainability, as the Green Party always stands for, and a vote for collaborative government working together across party lines, finding the best ideas wherever they are, and working together to put them in place.
Thanks, John.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Janmaat. Thanks to all of you for your contributions and your participation in this forum today. And who knows, depending on when and if we hear an outcome in the time frame that it takes to get many, many hundreds of thousands of votes, we may be in a situation that you have actually described, a situation that is not dissimilar to the situation that we currently were previously in. So it's BC after all, so who knows where we may end up. So I want to thank all of you for putting your name forward and provide some additional background for those that have tuned in. We did not take an approach by precluding candidates from participating in this. In fact, we have traditionally anyone that puts their name forward, we invite them to participate. It is not our position as the Chamber of Commerce to decide who will participate or not. We all invite all participants that were registered candidates and have been put forward, and that includes Mr. Kulik from the NDP, who decided last night not to participate. But I do want to thank all of you for putting your names forward and participating today. And this is just a slice, I'm sure you all, just to confirm, you all have websites or information available, I would assume. So hopefully what you've heard today helps a little bit or piques your curiosity such that you want to find out more information. All these candidates are very approachable. You can check out their websites for more information. You can check out the website that the Chamber has established, and you can find more information on the biographies of the various candidates as well. There is information available. We're going to wrap things up today by thanking those that have made this possible, including the Okanagan Mainline Real Estate Board. They have been sponsors and supporters of forums such as this for some time. We appreciate them joining us in these uncertain times to put this and the other forums on as well. We want to thank the Fruit Growers Association and our many stakeholders and partners, including the Lake Country Chamber of Commerce, as well as Uptown Rutland Business Association, Tourism Kelowna also contributed, and then our regular partners, UDI and the Canadian Home Builders Okanagan. I think I've listed most of them. We've all collaborated to make this forum possible. In conclusion, just to leave you with a note, tomorrow is the last day for advance voting, so make sure you participate that way. Participate any way you can, up to and including voting on Election Day, which is October 24th. Continue the conversation, and as you move forward, because it's Small Business Week, remember that when you're out there, be as positive as you can, be kind, and make sure you get out and show locals some love. Spend a little extra money, tip a little bigger, help your favorite small business, particularly during Small Business Week, but throughout the pandemic. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks to the team here at SW Event Technology that have made today's event possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.